Hey, my name is Trent, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Entry Level Esports. So, what we're going to try and do with this show is give me about 10 to 15 minutes a week to answer some questions about general esports with a Heroes of the Storm focus, since that's the whole point of this channel and the YouTube channel that accompanies it. So what we're doing today is kind of doing a test run of the format to see how you guys like it, give us some feedback, make sure all of the audio and everything works on my end, and to also give me a chance to kind of talk a little bit more in detail about the issues that came up with Gold Club and the new support patch that all just kind of happened out of nowhere. And I feel like, based on some of the stuff I've seen on Reddit and things, I needed to kind of talk through a little bit more of it rather than just trying to write an article, which I may still end up doing depending on the feedback to this. So, with that being the case, in the future, you're going to want to follow me at Trent_esports on Twitter or the @TrollsGG Twitter accounts so that you can get your questions answered on the next show that comes up next week, the week after, so on and so forth. Anything about esports as a business, organizations, roster changes, analyzing the HGC, whatever questions you might have. If I don't know the answer, I'll find somebody that does. I have lots of really cool friends that are smarter than me. So without all of that out of the way, let's get into the topic for today. To give you guys a little bit of background, what happened was Blizzard has released a new patch for Here's the Storm that pretty much across the board nerfed healing, health, and damage for every single support in the game, which is, for some people, a really welcome change because it's going to potentially kill the double support meta in competitive play. For some people, it's horrible because it makes supports not interesting or fun. That's not really what we're here to talk about today. What we're here to talk about today is the fact that Blizzard pushed this patch that completely changes the game live to all servers, including China, yesterday. And when the patch hit the live server in China, it made it so that every single team that's over in China right now competing in the Gold Club World Championships, which includes the two best teams in Korea, Ballistics and KSV, Roll20 from North America, Fnatic and Dignitas from Europe, all of those teams lost the ability to practice Hero League on the patch that they are playing the tournament on, which is not the end of the world. That happens to teams a lot. But what also happened in China, kind of as an unforeseen consequence, is China does not have a tournament server. So normally what happens with Heroes Esports is when a new patch hits the live server that we play in Quick Match and Hero League and all that good stuff, it doesn't affect esports right away because there's a tournament server that keeps the old patch so that HGC matches, BlizzCon games, tournaments like Gold Club can be played on the old patch that all of the teams have been practicing on, preparing on, making notes on, and doing all of their scrimming on without affecting their preparation for the tournament. Because China doesn't have a tournament, an official widespread tournament server, that can't happen for the teams that are in Gold Club right now. So we've had 4 days of Gold Club. There's still several more days of group stage going on, and then an entire bracket stage next week that still all have to happen before this tournament concludes. And the tournament has a prize pool of $300,000 up for grabs. So there's a lot at stake here. And it's usually one of the most exciting events of the year because it's kind of the culmination of everything that we've been working towards. It's all of the best teams from every region, all of the major regions coming together after BlizzCon for one last chance to test each other before we get into the new year. So they've enabled a tournament server for the Cube, the building where Gold Club takes place. But that tournament server is very limited in its capacity. It can't support 40 PCs functioning all at once. So the teams effectively can't scrim on the old patch. There's no way in China right now for any team to, in their practice rooms, in their hotels, in their private areas, to practice and prepare on the old patch that's on the tournament server, the patch that they played on today. If you go watch the VODs from today, they're being played on the old patch. And there's no way for a team to continue practicing and preparing on that patch. So Gold Club was essentially caught out of the blue with this. I've confirmed with managers and players, it's been confirmed on Reddit that not a single team was aware that a patch was coming, and not a single team was aware that a patch was going to change the patch that was being used in the middle of this tournament, which is an important point that we'll get to a little bit later, but it's important for you to know nobody knew that this was coming except Blizzard, essentially. They may have told a couple people, but none of those people told the teams that are involved in this tournament. So Gold Club was basically faced with an impossible situation. Do you run the rest of the tournament on the old patch that no teams can practice on anymore, or in the middle of your tournament, do you switch to the new patch? And I believe they made the least terrible decision that they could have. What they're going to do is the rest of the group phase, which finishes this week, is going to be played on the old patch, the patch that they've been playing the rest of the group phase on. Then for the bracket stage, they're going to move to the new patch with Sergeant Hammer banned because she was reworked. And usually in Here's the Storm Esports, a reworked or new champion or hero doesn't see competitive play, isn't allowed in competitive play until they've been out for at least 2 weeks. So the Sergeant Hammer rework is too new. You can't allow Sergeant Hammer. There could be wacky interactions. She could be completely broken. There's no way of knowing that without proper testing. So they've just decided to make a rule that Sergeant Hammer is banned from the rest of the tournament once they switch over to the live patch. Ultimately, I think this is the right decision because it lets teams actually practice. It lets them use what they've learned from their matches yesterday to prepare for today. Once we get into the bracket phase, there's just really no other solution outside of what they chose. So I agree with Gold Club on the decision that they made. The main issue here, we're going to talk a little bit in a minute about why a patch coming in the middle of a tournament is a problem. But before we do that, the main thing I want to get across today, if you close the browser in 2 seconds and you don't hear anything else, the main thing I want to get across is that Blizzard has to change the way that they do their communication on stuff like this, on rule changes, on structure changes, on patches being released. It's not Blizzard's responsibility to hold a patch for a tournament that's not even an official Blizzard tournament. Like Blizzard and the HGC don't run Gold Club. Gold Club is run by an organization in China. So it's not Blizzard's responsibility to hold the patch. However, Blizzard is promoting this tournament. A bunch of HGC teams are in this tournament. It's a huge high-profile event for Heroes of the Storm Esports. And it matters if it's a successful competitive event or not for Blizzard's esports and Heroes of the Storm competitive structure going forward. So I think it is Blizzard's responsibility to tell someone more than a day in advance that a patch is coming and nothing can be done to prevent that patch affecting a tournament, a huge tournament that everyone has been looking forward to all year. Gold Club is always an amazing tournament. It has the best format out of any tournament of the year. It has only the most competitive teams from every region. There's a huge prize pool. It's at the very end of the year. It's a great tournament. It's really important that Gold Club is a successful tournament. And when you throw a patch last minute with no warning at a tournament like this, to me, it looks unprofessional. It's disrespectful to the players that are competing in the tournament. It's disrespectful to Gold Club, who suddenly has to figure out how to change the structure of this tournament that they've been preparing for a year. It just looks really bad on Blizzard's front for there to have not been more communication. There may have been nothing they could do about the patch coming at this time. It needed to hit all servers. It's more important that a patch goes live for everybody that's playing the game than it is for a patch to be held for the 8 teams that are competing in this tournament. I agree with all of that, but one, it's insane that there's no tournament server in China if there's going to be tournaments in China. That puts everything that happens in China on a completely different playing field than everywhere else in the entire world. Anywhere that there isn't a tournament server is hamstrung leading into events like BlizzCon or like Gold Club. That's a huge problem. And the fact that nobody knew about this, to me, is not acceptable. All it would have taken was somebody at Blizzard sending a direct message to the managers of these teams being like, hey, just so that you're aware, in the middle of this tournament, a patch is going to go live. So you need to be reading the patch notes. You need to have your analysts thinking about how these changes are going to affect things. You need to be talking to teams back home so that you can get more data on how scrims on the PTR are going. There's so much more that teams could have done, even if there was no way to avoid the patch affecting the tournament. If teams had known 3 days ago that this was going to happen, they could have been making moves to prepare for these changes and account for them in their preparation for this tournament. And there's a number of reasons why that's a huge deal that we're going to get to in a second. But ultimately, I think the biggest takeaway from this is when something like this is going to happen, someone at Blizzard has to stand up and say, we have decided that there are esports for this game. We have invested a ton of money in turning this game into a professional level esports game that has replays aired on the Disney Channel, that has a tournament every year at our biggest convention of the year, that has hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars invested into it. We need to consider that with how that is affected with every decision that we make, including when we release patches. If we can't avoid a patch being released, we have to communicate with these teams and put them in the best position to succeed. Bottom line, whether you think the patch coming out is great or not, I think we can all agree that more communication is a good thing. And with something like this, there's no downside for Blizzard in having this communication. They have to communicate better. So that's the biggest piece I wanted to say. Now I want to talk a little bit about why it's so problematic that a patch drops in the middle of a tournament, and kind of give you the perspective of a player, a coach, a manager that's in one of these tournaments, so that we can kind of see from their perspective why something like this is such a problem. So first, let's talk about Gold Club specifically. So the way that the Gold Club structure works as a tournament, there's this round robin phase where all of the teams play a 2-game series. They just play 2 games. It doesn't matter who wins or loses each game. The series is over in 2 games. And based on your record, the total number of wins, draws, and losses you have, you earn points that seed you into the bracket stage. So all 8 teams are going to make it to the next round, but 4 of those teams are going to be on the loser's side, 4 of those teams are going to be on the winner's side. And that's a huge difference because it changes how quickly you're eliminated from the tournament. So what's happening right now is all teams are playing against each other, scrimming against each other. They're competing against each other constantly all week long, and they're collecting data on each other. So teams are holding back strategies right now because this isn't the part of the tournament that technically matters. Like, it matters for seeding, but if you're Dignitas, you know most likely you're going to be in the winner's side of the bracket. The 3 Chinese teams are going to be on the bottom, and then one of Fnatic, Dignitas, or Roll20 is also going to be on the loser's side. That's just what's going to happen in this tournament. So if you're Fnatic or Dignitas, you're hiding strategies right now. You're not revealing every single thing that you have against KSV, Ballistics, Roll20, Fnatic. You're hiding some pocket strategies. You're not revealing your best drafts. You're not revealing how highly you prioritize some heroes, because every single team is taking notes on that for the bracket stage of the tournament. And you as a team have specifically prepared those strategies for the next part of the bracket phase, for the next part of the tournament. With this patch coming out, the strength of every hero changes, the priority of every hero changes, your strength as a team completely changes. Every single support was nerfed. That doesn't only change your priority on supports, that changes which carries are strong, which tanks are strong, where you need to draft certain things. Everything about the meta of the tournament changes. And so if you've spent all of this time preparing all of these strategies that you've hidden from the group stage, you've potentially lost games and essentially sacrificed games in the group phase to hide strategies that you know are going to win you games in the bracket stage. All of that goes out the window now. None of those strategies are viable anymore. The game has completely changed. So all of that mind gaming that you've done in scrims, all of that mind gaming that you've done in your tournament matches is completely useless now. You can't run those same strategies anymore because everything has changed about the game. It basically would be like if you at your job had to give a presentation. You had to convince your bosses why you should still have your job. And you were told 3 months ago that you were going to have to give this presentation. So you've spent all of your time, because this is your job. This is your livelihood. You have to prepare this presentation and have it be perfect. So you spent 3 months preparing this perfect presentation. You know backwards and forwards the transitions, where you're going to put a joke, how your PowerPoint lines up, your musical cues. Everything about your presentation you've prepared perfectly, and you know exactly how it's going to go. Then when you show up to give your presentation, the boss is like, so it turns out we've actually changed the software that we use, and you're not going to be able to use your PowerPoint anymore. You can still use all of your music, you can still use all of your notes, but you can't use PowerPoint as a program anymore. So now all of your visual aids that you prepared are gone. Half your jokes involved your slideshow changing at the right time so they don't land properly. Your presentation is completely different. All of that preparation you've done is basically invalidated by one change that's been made by your boss. And in our example here, Blizzard is basically the boss of Heroes of the Storm Esports. They control when things change and when things happen because they make the game. So by changing the patch in the middle of a tournament, they've basically invalidated months of preparation that these teams have made for Gold Club. And all of the work that they've been doing this past week, learning each other, making notes, going back at night and watching their replays and saying, okay, well, it looks like Roll20 really values Junkrat, so we can exploit that next time. Now you have no idea. You have no idea what's going to be happening in the next phase of the bracket because you've never played on this patch before. You have no data on the other teams on this patch. So it's a completely different tournament meta. In addition to that, it just adds a bunch of stress to a situation that's already really high pressure and stressful. Some of you are going to laugh at that and just say, well, that's their job. But jobs are already stressful. It's a situation where if at your job you have a high pressure job where people are relying on you day in and day out, and then your boss comes to you and says, oh, also you have to wear these 10-pound weights around your wrists every single day. Well, hey, it's your job and your boss told you to do it, so just do it. That's not really fair, though. That's not like you're already highly stressed. Already your performance is affected by stress and by your nerves and your ability to perform. And there's no way that adding 10-pound weights to your wrists improves your ability to do your job. It just changes how you do your job. And so it's not necessary. So there's no reason to add that extra level of stress to an already high pressure situation. So for these teams, they're already in a tournament with a $300,000 prize pool. They're already on stage every single night with people reacting, with people like me writing recaps and having opinions about them on Twitter. They're already going up against the best teams in the world with new rosters that are unproven and having people evaluate how they're going to do next year based on how they're doing with 2 weeks of practice time. And now on top of all of that, you're adding another level of stress with this new patch. And you can say all you want that, well, it's their job to adapt, but they've already done that. They've already put in all of this work to prepare for this tournament. They've already done all of their pre-game managing and preparing. They've already taken all of these notes, and now you're asking them to do all of that again on a brand new patch that they haven't had any time to prepare on. That's not fair. That wouldn't be fair to any student in school. That wouldn't be fair to any person in a job. Why is it fair for an athlete? You know, if the NFL suddenly came out tomorrow and said, oh, hey, for the rest of the season, you can only run the ball, everyone would lose their mind. That would never happen. But because of the way that esports function, we have these patches that are necessary for these games to survive. So it's kind of a necessary evil, but it's not healthy for esports. So to throw it in the middle of a tournament is just flat out not fair to these teams. If you don't care that it's not fair, that's one thing, but you can't deny that it isn't fair to the teams that are putting in all this work to try and succeed. The last point I want to make about changing patches is it changes how teams are rewarded. So a tournament like BlizzCon, a tournament like Gold Club, these tournaments are designed to recognize the best team in the world. That's why they get all of these teams together that are only the best teams from every region. That's why Gold Club only invited Roll20, because Roll20 is the only team in North America from last season that would have had a shot to take games off of these other teams in this bracket. Like Team Freedom and Tempo might have been able to take games off of the Chinese teams. They don't have a shot against Dignitas Fnatic, KSV, or Ballistics. Roll20 does. They've proven that. So this tournament is designed so that we can figure out who the best team in the world is right now to get the highest caliber competitive experience for these teams. With this specific Gold Club, that's a little bit undermined because of the roster changes that happened, but that wasn't the case when Gold Club was announced. Gold Club every single year has been all of the best teams coming together for one final greatly structured tournament to crown the very best team in the world. I mean, you look at BlizzCon, it had best of 3 in top 8. That's not how you crown the best team in the world. Ultimately, probably the best team still won that tournament, but the Gold Club structure is a way better metric for measuring the strength of these teams at the end of the year. And so when you throw a patch in at the last moment, it stops this tournament from being the culmination of everything that you've done throughout the year. It stops this tournament from being about the teams that put in the time before the tournament to prepare, the teams that have optimized their strategies on every map. It stops it from being about the very, very best teams who have mastered their understanding of Heroes of the Storm throughout the year. And it's about who can adapt the fastest. It's about who can find the broken things on this patch the fastest, because you're not going to have time to find counters for those things. I mean, people get annoyed at cheese strategies. The rest of this tournament is basically going to be cheese strategies, because someone's going to find something broken and throw it out in a tournament match before you can find a counter for it. And you don't have time to find a counter for it, because if you're in the loser's side of the bracket, you're out. Whereas if there's more time on the patch, more teams can find these things, more teams can find counters for these things. There's more time for us to see the patch become optimized before the tournament happens. These teams know this patch really well that they're playing on right now. They've studied this patch. They've prepared on this patch. They have hidden strategies optimized on this patch. We're seeing these teams at their very, very best that they can ever be on this patch in the group stage of Gold Club. And it's led to some really interesting matches and some really good matches. But now with these support changes coming in, all of that is thrown out the window. We don't know how the early game works. We don't know how the lane matchups work. We don't know the best gank paths and objective timings and lane timings. All of that is different now. And these teams don't have enough time to figure that out. So if one team figures that out, they're going to win. Now, at an international tournament, that's a little bit less true because Korea is just generally so much better than every other region. So most likely, KSV is still going to win this tournament. But the rest of the bracket stage games are going to be affected. Roll20 might figure out some broken strategy and beat Ballistics, Fnatic, and Dignitas because they've figured out something that nobody has an answer for, and they can get a free win 1 out of 5 games, and the rest of the games are close, and nobody has a counter to that. But if Roll20 isn't the best team, are they really the team we want to see go against KSV in the finals? Or do we want to see the best 2 teams in the finals play an epic series to determine the Gold Club champion? For me, when it comes to tournaments like Gold Club and like BlizzCon, I want to see teams at their very best. I want to see the most optimal Heroes of the Storm play I've ever seen. I want to see the culmination of a year's journey reaching its final point at this tournament. I think rewarding adaptation is great during the regular season. I think adding patches in the regular season is great. I think adding a patch before Western Clash, Eastern Clash, Midseason Brawl, all of that is fine because none of those tournaments crown a champion. BlizzCon and Gold Club crown a world champion for the rest of the year. For the rest of the year, KSV is the best team in the entire world. Without question, it cannot be argued because they won BlizzCon, because they won the culmination of the entire year of competitive heroes. If this had happened during BlizzCon, we can't confidently say that because the patch is brand new. We have no way of knowing how this patch would have shaken out if it had been out for a month or two. If teams had had time to prepare their strategies, had had time to react and plan counter strategies, to figure out how to optimize their compositions. Instead, we're basically going to get scrims. And yes, I would love to watch scrims, but I don't want to see scrims played for $300,000. I want to see professional tournament level matches played for $300,000. And we can't get that as effectively when a patch comes out in the middle of a tournament because it affects the way that teams prepare. And it doesn't reward the team with the best preparation, the best skill. It rewards the teams that find the broken things fastest. That's a different skill set. If you want a tournament that rewards that, great. But don't have it be these epic, great tournaments that are high-level international tournaments that decide $300,000 champions, BlizzCon world champions, these kinds of things, where it's about so much more than just, fun. This is their careers on the line. This is their legacy on the line. This is their Super Bowl. This is for Hall of Fame records. There's too much at stake for it to just be a silly, neat tournament for our entertainment. Ultimately, it is about entertainment, but we can get that entertainment by seeing the very, very best out of these teams, not them figuring things out. We can see that during the regular season. We've got lots of time to see that. So, with that, I'm sure you have a lot of opinions about what I've had to say. That's going to end the official episode, first pilot episode of Entry Level Esports. Be sure to follow me on Trent_esports on Twitter and TrollsGG as well on Twitter so that you can have your question answered next week on the show. Keep an eye on the Trolls GG YouTube channel as well for the VOD of this episode, as well as future episodes. Subscribe there, because most of our episodes won't be streamed live in the future. They'll go direct to YouTube, so you want to make sure that you subscribe to the YouTube channel to get notifications of when new episodes come up. With that, I hope you've enjoyed the show. We've got a bunch of people in the chat right now, so if you guys want to stick around for a little while, we've got probably about 15 more minutes before we have to shut down the stream. So if you want to react to what I've said or you want to ask any other questions, I've got the chat open on my phone, and we can answer some of those as well. If nobody has any questions, then we'll head out for the day, and we'll see what you have to say on Reddit. So we'll vamp for time with the stream delay to see if anybody has any questions. And while we're doing that, I do want to react a little bit more to the whole it's their job. My job is weird and wacky too, so why shouldn't their job be weird and wacky? The other point I think that people really need to understand about being a professional athlete is how volatile it is. Most of us as regular people, our careers can last a lifetime. You know, if you work at McDonald's, you can work at McDonald's for the rest of your life. You can be a cashier, then you can become a manager, then you can become an owner, a general manager of a store, then you can move to the corporate office, then you can become a trainer. You can graduate your whole life just within McDonald's or any other corporation. Or even if you can't stay at McDonald's, you can do your same job. If you're the manager at McDonald's, you can get fired from McDonald's or have that McDonald's close and go get a manager's job at Burger King, because that skill set transfers. Your resume transfers. Being a professional athlete does not work that way. It flat out doesn't. The average esports or professional athlete career is between 1 and 3 years. That's all you get as a professional athlete. And those skills do not translate to other jobs the rest of your life. You know, being really good at Heroes of the Storm is not impressive on your resume to go sell cars at a Nissan dealership in 5 years. When you can't find a job in esports, you're not good enough to be a caster, you don't get a job as a coach. You know, you don't, there's very, very few directly transferable jobs like coach, analyst, caster, observer, these kinds of things. A handful of people will get those jobs coming from a competitive career. But for most people, they're going to get 3 years as a professional athlete and then have to figure out a regular career for the rest of their life. They're going to have to go sell insurance. They're going to go have to work at a bank. They're going to have to go do one of these other things. And they've basically sacrificed their resume to be able to live their dream and provide us with entertainment for 3 years. And that's all they've gotten out of it. And they have nothing for the rest of their life to utilize that for. That's why professional athletes get paid so much in traditional sports, because that money has to last them a long time, because they're not going to be able to get an equivalent job when they leave that sport. When these guys retire from Heroes of the Storm, they're going to either have to go back to school or they're going to have to get kind of a crummy job for the most part, because all of their peers have better resumes, more experience, and have skill sets that are directly transferable to the jobs they're trying to get. So everything that whenever you try to compare your job to someone that's a professional athlete, it's not comparable at all. Their job is more volatile than yours. Their job is more risky than yours. Their job is not sustainable at all, guaranteed. So that comparison holds no water, and I'm kind of bored of hearing about it. So now that we've vamped for time, let's see. We've got some questions in the chat here. Wonder Raid asks, do you think the Switch should do a new Smash or a Smash 4 port? Technically, this is a Heroes of the Storm show, so people get mad at me for that kind of stuff. I think eventually we're going to see a new Smash game on the Switch, just because it's going to sell a whole lot of units. And Nintendo doesn't know how to port games and how to fix things, so I don't have any faith in them to be able to fix Smash 4 and the competitive problems that are in it. So I'd rather them just make a new game so that we can figure out this whole mess again, because that's more fun and it's going to bring more people into the scene, and that's really more what I care about. Um, Next question, also from WonderAid. I like a lot of your stuff. I want to ask, though, do you have a hero you want to see in HOTS the most? For me, my favorite, the two classes I played in World of Warcraft were a protection paladin and a balanced druid. So I want to see true representations of those. We've got Uther and Malfurion that sort of have those things. Like Malfurion does Moonfire, and I cast a lot of Moonfires as a Moonkin, but he's got a normal Night Elf face, and he does healing. I want somebody that's casting hurricanes, that's casting thorns on people to try and tank stuff, that's casting wrath like crazy, that's dropping insect swarms and trees on people, and I want him to look like a giant chicken. That's a hero I want to play and have it be a ranged assassin that can jump around and cast Moonfire all over the place, because that was my favorite thing to do. I also want a tank that's a paladin that drops Consecrate. Johanna kind of does all of those things, so we probably won't ever see a true protection paladin. But maybe we can get a Johanna skin that is like tier 11 paladin gear or something. That would be cool. Outside of that, I think we're kind of getting a lot of the big stuff in Heroes. The other thing I want to see is another really experimental hero, because I feel like that's one of the times where Heroes grows the most, is when we get a Cho'Gall, when we get an Abathur, when we get these weird things that you can't get in other MOBAs that brings people in. You know, Cho'Gall was a great infection vector for people to come into Heroes. I really want to see another version of that come into the game. So Lord Boo asks, if you play any other MOBAs, are there any mechanics or kits from other games you hope to see added to HOTS? So for people that watch Troll and HGC will know that I followed League of Legends very, very closely for about 5 years. I played the game a lot. I worked for Riot Games as a journalist for a couple of years. So I know League of Legends backwards and forwards. My favorite champion in that game was Malphite. So I would love somebody that has Malphite style initiation, that you dash in and cause a knock-up and are just a giant tank in there. Johanna's Falling Sword is kind of that, but I feel like Malphite, like, just that initiation was really satisfying because it was so impactful and flashy. So I'd really love that. I think we could also use some more interesting ways to do auto attack range damage. Something like Jinx would be really cool, where you have that transition between area of effect damage and single target damage that not only lets you be more versatile, makes you a wave clear threat as well as a single target threat, which in Heroes of the Storm would be really dangerous, but I think would be really interesting. And we don't have a lot of global assassination tools. Ash Arrow and Jinx Rocket in League of Legends are amazingly hype in esports, and we really don't have any of that in Heroes. What we've got is Falstad Gust, which creates kind of the same thing, but you can't snipe someone with Gust. And I loved some of my favorite stuff in watching League of Legends esports was watching Doublelift snipe somebody with a Jinx Rocket from halfway across the map. And I'd love to see something like that really take form, especially on some of these giant maps we have where you could like snipe somebody that's up on the top Sky Temple shrine, and like as they're getting killed, or you can get a read on a Rhaegar that's trying to take a hard camp, or a Gazlo that's trying to solo a boss, and you just fire a giant shot at them that blows them up. Last question, any desire for a certain map mechanic we've yet to be blessed with in HOTS? Biggest thing for me is another map like Cursed Hollow, where the map objective isn't the true win condition, but it's a factor in the game. Warhead Junction kind of did this, but it did it poorly. On Cursed Hollow, high-level players will tell you the actual win condition is the boss. It's not the curse. The curse creates pressure, but the boss is what wins you the game. And it creates these really interesting, different things where you can sacrifice tributes, where you can sacrifice a curse and trade a boss, where endgame bosses become so much more impactful. Do you do the boss after the curse or before? It creates all of these really interesting decisions around these two mechanics that decide the game. And I'd really like to see another version of that where we have some kind of mechanic that creates team fights and creates pressure, but isn't the true win condition for the game, where there's a boss that decides the win condition for the game, or there's more mercenary camps that create more pressure, or there's some sort of secondary mechanic that makes it so that you win the game in a more traditional MOBA fashion. But it has that hero's bent where you have this map objective that's forcing team fights, because that's really the competitive edge that Heroes of the Storm has over all these other games. You can win a game of League of Legends, Smite, Dota without ever taking the big map objectives. Technically, in League of Legends, if you just ignore the dragon the whole game, you could farm enough gold to win the game. You cannot ignore the map objectives in Heroes of the Storm. You can't. They force you to get out of lane. They force you to get out of lane early in the game. That's why Heroes of the Storm is so cool. So I would love to see more traditional style MOBA elements with that Heroes of the Storm flavor where you have to get out of lane before 5 minutes to fight, because otherwise you're going to lose too much of an advantage. So with that, our invisible producer has told me that we do have to bring the stream to a close. I'm going to hang out in the chat for a little bit if you've got more questions, or you can always jump on my Twitter. I'll be around all the rest of the day at Trent_esports. My DMs are open if you've got questions, or you can just tweet them at me. Thanks so much, you guys, for dropping in. I know this was really impromptu all of a sudden, but I'm really excited about this show going forward. I'm really excited to see what questions you have for me to research and to learn more about so that I can give you a great answer to it on future shows. So definitely follow us on all platforms so that you can get up to date. Drop us some feedback in the Reddit thread that's up on Reddit now about how the show went today and what you think we can improve for the future. And we will talk to you guys next time.